Evening, Space Monkeys. Welcome to Political Fight Club. I'm Robert Durden, and in this episode, we're going to be talking about Nazis, unfortunately, in America and in Ukraine. And we're also going to be talking about Nina Jankowicz, or as she was known in high school as Janky, and I will hereby refer to her as such. That's actually misinformation. I don't know if that was actually her high school nickname, but I still want to call her Janky, so it makes me happy to think it might have been. And anyway, she's not actually a Nazi, but this article that just came out in The Nation seems to indicate that basically the new truth minister has a history of whitewashing the Azov battalion and actually running interference for Nazi groups. So that's horrible and not at all surprising here in 2022 America. So I'm going to read you here. His name is Lev Golinkin from The Nation. This is a really, really great article. I highly recommend you read the entire thing for yourself. We're going to read about the first half, talking about how Nina Jankowicz, aka Janky, used to work for something called StopFake. And StopFake was an apparatus used to, quote-unquote, fight Russian disinformation. But as it will be delineated very, very specifically in this article, you'll see that what she really did was kind of whitewash exactly how awful the Azov are and how awful certain groups that are Nazi groups in Ukraine like C14 were. So let's read you here from Lev Golinkin. Meet the head of Biden's new disinformation governing board. And at the end of this, I will pontificate on something that is kind of disturbing in this country, which is how easily a lot of lefties seem to be like really nonchalant, not even paying attention to the fact that we just gave $20 billion to a highly Nazified Ukrainian military force. They don't care about that. Giving those Nazis weapons doesn't seem to be a problem for those people. But then when we have somebody of Nazi ideology in America, like go on a killing spree with a weapon, they're all up in arms about that, which they should be. But it's weird that, like, there's a very fine line with these people. If you're an American Nazi and you go out and shoot a whole bunch of people and give justification for the empire to increase the American police budget, they're definitely for that. They're definitely for calling that a Nazi who's very violent. We should not give them weapons. We should take their weapons away. But then when it comes to Ukrainian Nazis, they don't really give a shit. And in fact, they want to give them as many assault rifles as possible. It's just interesting, the divide in this country, ain't it? So anyway, back to the actual article here. Late last month, the Joe Biden administration publicly confirmed that a disinformation governing board working group had been created within the DHS, which is the Department of Homeland Security. The news prompted a flood of concern about the impact of such an Orwellian organ in America, but there's no need to engage in hypotheticals to understand the dangers. One has only to consider the past of Nina Jankowicz, aka Janky, that's my words, not his. Nina Jankowicz, Janky, the head of the new disinformation board. Jankowicz's experience as disinformation warrior includes her work with StopFake, a U.S. government-funded anti-disinformation organization founded in March 2014 and lauded as a model of how to combat Kremlin lies. 4 years later, StopFake began aggressively whitewashing two Ukrainian neo-Nazi groups with a long track record of violence, including war crimes. Today, StopFake is an official Facebook fact-checking partner, which gives it the power to censor news, while Jankowicz is America's disinformation czar. If the Biden administration is serious about combating threats such as white supremacy, perhaps it should first reflect on the old Roman question, who will guard the guardians? StopFake was founded right after Ukraine's 2014 Maidan uprising ousted the country's president and swept in a new U.S.-backed government into power. Formed by professors and students from the Kiev Mohyla Journalism School, StopFake presented itself as a plucky grassroots group wielding hard facts and semi-permanent smirks as it shredded Russian propaganda. It gained notoriety by producing slick videos hosted by dynamic disinformation warriors debunking the Moscow lies of the day. Western reporters and checkbooks were paying attention. Shortly after its creation, StopFake began receiving funding from Western governments, including, and you guys can probably guess from who, the National Endowment for Democracy. Where have we heard that name before? Anyway, an organization that is mainly funded by the US Congress and the British Embassy in Ukraine. It was also supported by George Soros' Open Society Foundation. StopFake has run numerous episodes that cover Soros but failed to disclose this potential conflict of interest, a violation of basic tenets of journalism. Among StopFake's hosts was Jankowicz, a graduate of Bryn Mawr in the Georgetown School of Foreign Service, who was already part of the burgeoning disinformation warrior industry while in Ukraine as a Fulbright Clinton Public Policy Fellow. I heard a Clinton in there. That ain't good. On January 29th, 2017, she hosted StopFake episode 117, whose lead story dealt with a perennial obsession of Russian propaganda, Ukraine's volunteer battalions. These are the dozens of paramilitaries formed in 2014 to fight against Russian-backed separatists in Ukraine's Donbass. From the beginning, Moscow focused on the violent and far-right nature of these units. At the time of Jankowicz's piece, the Russian press was bristling at Kiev's creating a new holiday to honor military volunteers. Moscow commentators depicted this as a celebration of far-right butchers. Jankowicz offered an emphatically different take, quote, volunteer battalions organized throughout the country, and they supported weak Ukrainian armed forces and prevented further Russian separatist encroachment. Today, the volunteer battalions are part of the official Ukrainian armed forces, overseen by the Defense of Interior Ministries, she said in her StopFake debunking segment. Quote, the volunteer movement in Ukraine extends far beyond military service. Volunteer groups are active in supporting Ukraine's military with food, clothing, medicine, and post-battle rehabilitation, as well as working actively with the nearly 2 million internal refugees displaced by the war in Ukraine, she added. While Jankowicz extolled the battalions, an on-screen graphic displayed patches of 4 paramilitaries: Aidar, Dnipro-1, Donbass, and Azov. All 4 have a documented record of war crimes, while Azov is an outright neo-Nazi group. On September 10, 2014, 3 years before Jankowicz's warm portrayal of volunteer battalions, Newsweek ran an article titled, quote, Ukrainian nationalist volunteers committing ISIS-style war crimes. The story, which covered a report by Amnesty International, featured Aidar, one of the battalions lauded in Jankowicz's segment. According to Amnesty, Aidar fighters amassed a record of widespread abuses ranging from kidnapping and torture to possible executions. 3 months later, Amnesty issued an urgent report about Aidar and Dnipro-1, another paramilitary featured in Jankowicz's segment, blocking food from eastern Ukraine towns and villages, quote, using starvation of citizens as a method of warfare is a war crime, Amnesty stated. So we're going to read to you a little bit further here, but already looking like a perfect candidate to run the Ministry of Truth in America nowadays. Jesus Christ. Do we ever live in a cartoon? This is some really scary shit, guys. Just wait till it gets even worse when they talk about what how she whitewashed what C14, which is an ultra-violent neo-Nazi group in Ukraine, did. We're going to keep going right here. The Donbass Battalion, the 3rd paramilitary in Jankowicz's segment, is another unit notorious for torture, as documented by the UN, among others. The 4th group, Azov, not only has its own history of war crimes, but is avowedly neo-Nazi. Indeed, the Azov patch shown in Jankowicz's video is a stylized Wolf's Angel, the N with the sword, which you guys may have seen, a popular white supremacist rune used by groups like Aryan Nations. Azov, which is now a premier hub of transnational white supremacy, has been extensively covered by Western media outlets, including by me, in The Nation. Its nature was well known by the time of Jankowicz's 2017 StopFake video. In a 2020 book, Jankowicz briefly acknowledged Azov as a far-right group, but immediately pivoted to portraying them as victims of a Russian hoax. During Jankowicz's tenure with StopFake, her last known episode aired May 21st, 2017, the disinformation site continued being touted as a pioneer in combating Russian propaganda. In March 2017, a fawning Politico story heralded StopFake as the grand wizards of the anti-fake news ecosystem. Which, again, as we all know, the Ministry of Truth isn't going to be the Ministry of Truth. It's going to be the Ministry of Lies that combats the truth by censoring and taking people down off the internet that are telling too much truth. And then, like I said, since the General Strike Summit and before, there's 2 arms to the propaganda outlet. They got to censor the truth tellers and then smear them, ruin their lives, or take them down whatever they have to do to shut you up. But they also have to convince everybody that their lies are the truth. And they're having a hard time with that first part, which means that the second part, the censoring, goes into overdrive. Hence the fact that we have a Ministry of Truth now. It's a last-ditch effort of a dying empire with a flailing propaganda apparatus that nobody listens to anymore. The mainstream media are generally distrusted by all young people and most old people nowadays in America. So what do? They create a Ministry of Truth to rein all of us truth-tellers, all of us indie mediaites online down. Nina's going to be the queen of that, as it turns out. It was an ironically prophetic description, the anti-fake news, the grand wizards of the anti-fake news ecosystem, given that Jankowicz's misleading, nothing to see here report about the battalions turned out to be a mere fraction of what StopFake has done for the Ukraine's far right. By 2018, StopFake started defending C14, a neo-Nazi gang that conducted horrific pogroms of Ukraine's Roma. After media outlet Hromske described C14 as neo-Nazi, one of StopFake's founders tweeted, "For Hromske, C14 is neo-Nazi. In reality, one of them, Alexander Voitko, is a war veteran and before going to war, alum and faculty at this school, journalist at Foreign Newsweek desk at Channel 5. Now also active participant of War Veterans Grassroots Organization." End quote. As if the fact that the gang has a veteran somehow precludes it from also being neo-Nazi. Very good point. But you can see how the whitewashing continues, and you can expect a lot of that from the Ministry of Truth. If they can't directly take you down, and if there's something bad that comes out about something America's doing, you better bet your bottom dollar that it's going to be used to silence all voices of dissent. For instance, let's say that we were to do something in Syria or Somalia, you better believe that the United States Ministry of Truth is absolutely going to whitewash all the dirty little deeds that we're committing all over the globe, including funding Ukrainian Nazi groups like C14 and the Azov Battalion. That's kind of their function. Anyway, I digress. In 2020, StopFake defended C14 in a press release. The same year, news broke that C14 was aiding Kiev police in enforcing COVID quarantine measures. StopFake labeled this fake news, denying C14 is far right, and describing it as, quote, a community organization instead. Yeah, like the SS was a community organization. Instead, and citing C14's own denial of carrying out anti-Roma pogroms as evidence of its innocence. So they were like, yeah, well, they told us that they didn't do that, and we believed them. I digress again. StopFake has also continued defending the Azov Battalion. Last month, StopFake tweeted that the unit, which was formed out of a neo-Nazi gang, uses two neo-Nazi symbols in its insignia and has been documented as neo-Nazi by numerous Western outlets, quote, doesn't profess Nazi views as an official ideology, labeling stories about Azov and neo-Nazi groups as fake news. This is particularly disturbing because in February, Facebook reversed its ban on praising Azov. Facebook had previously banned the Azov Battalion's account, as well as posts celebrating the neo-Nazi organization. The reversal is stunning, given the platform's professed commitment to combating far-right extremism. It is unclear whether StopFake played a role in Facebook's decision to lift its Azov ban, but considering StopFake is Facebook's official fact-checking partner, it's hard to believe the group's track record of whitewashing Azov wasn't a factor. So, as I've said in the past, it's all about the hiring process when it comes to, creating a Ministry of Truth or getting one of these mainstream media pundits in front of a camera so millions of people can listen to their propaganda. They don't have to tell these people what to say all the time, because in the hiring process, you only hire people like Rachel Maddow, Wolf Blitzer, all of these liars on Fox News as well. They get that job because they've proven over the decades or the years that they are willing to whitewash things like this and willing to lie to people's faces. Nina Jankowicz got this job because she has a track record of doing very well whitewashing Nazism in Ukraine and combating Russian disinformation, which, that's just like the Hunter Biden's laptop story. They called that Russian misinformation, right? It's not. The New York Times came out and admitted that it wasn't. the New York Post, who originally wrote that article about Hunter Biden's laptop, had their article completely censored off the internet. You couldn't share it. You couldn't share it on Twitter, couldn't message it directly, and on Facebook, they completely suppressed it out of the algorithm. And now, when we know that, and the New York Times has now come out recently, like in the last month, and said that, oh, shoot, those emails are actually legit. Ben Schreckinger, who wrote the book The Bidens and double-checked all of this shit, he was actually right. And that's Russian disinformation. Yeah, so all Nina Jankowicz is out there to do is what they did to that article on any article that does anything to embarrass the Bidens or embarrass the neoliberal establishment or just embarrass the elites in this country. That is her function. And she got that job because she has a history of whitewashing Nazism, which, does that surprise you at all in today's America? Doesn't surprise me at all. When I tell you guys that the neoliberals and the neoconservatives, all the elites, are fascists, I'm not being facetious. As long as they are all about capital, as long as they don't give a shit about exploiting people, particularly people of color, that makes them fascists and it makes them borderline Nazis. So yeah, when I'm saying that, I'm not being facetious. Like, anybody that, you know, writes something incriminating about the Trumps or the Bidens is going to get labeled Russian disinformation, whether or not there's evidence of that, which there never is. They never have any fucking evidence. They just label you that so they can silence you, censor you, and that's what Nina Jankowicz's new job is to decide who is telling a little bit too much truth about the elites so that they can be honed in on by the Ministry of Truth and taken off the internet or blackbagged or wherever the fuck this is going. Seeing as there's a Nazism problem here in this country, I wouldn't be surprised to see some SS out there pretty soon. We're on the verge of V for Vendetta, and Nina Jankowicz, aka Janky, is the face up on that big screen in Times Square telling you exactly who not to listen to and barking orders into telephones to people that are part of this SS in America that are going to be blackbagging everybody and censoring the shit out of everybody who has a dissenting opinion or dissenting narrative from the official narrative. We live in a cartoon, and it's very, very scary. I'd like to point out here, right at the end, the point I made kind of at the beginning of this episode. It's interesting. It's not that hard to be consistent when it comes to disavowing and going after Nazis. I'm consistent in this instance. I think it's a bad thing that Biden just sent $20 billion, $20+ billion to Ukraine so that we can fund people like C14 and Azov. The squad was on board for that too, so it's not just Biden's fault. It's all the Democrats' fault. And basically everybody's fault except for the 57 Republicans who are apparently the right-wingers in this country. They voted against sending that money to Ukraine so they can arm Nazis. But I also am against this horrific shooting that just happened by apparently a neo-Nazi-leaning young male. I think he was 18 years old. I'm just reading about it now. It's fucking awful. He killed at least 10 people. Yeah, Nazism is bad. But if you're the type of person that is all up in arms about this American Nazi taking a gun and shooting a whole bunch of people in our country, but you're not up in arms about Joe Biden sending a whole bunch of guns and weapons to Ukrainian Nazis so they can kill a whole bunch of people across the ocean, then you are an inconsistent sack of shit. And I like to be consistent with my Nazism. It's really weird that a whole bunch of people were like not up in arms about what Biden is doing, arming Nazis. And as it turns out, they say that Putin's a monster. Putin's fucking killing a whole bunch of Nazis right now, by the way. Not that he isn't a monster, but he's actually the one killing Nazis right now. And then we have a shooting in this country by a Nazi, and all those same people 24 hours ago didn't give a shit. Now they're like, Nazism's a huge fucking problem. Those two things are not directly linked, but at least it would be nice for some of these fucking yuckos who I've already seen a couple of commentators come out and they're all up in arms about the shooting here at home due to a deranged Nazi white supremacist, but they didn't give a shit about us giving all of these guns to Nazis across the ocean. I don't understand the inconsistency, and it should be really fucking easy. The far left, if you actually give a shit about people and you're anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist, you should be against Nazis across the board. Is that too much to fucking ask? Nazism is fascism plus white supremacy. And fascism, defined by Mussolini, is the merger of the state and capitalism. So we have a fascist state here in America, and you're right, there's a white supremacy problem too. We're very close to a Nazi country with the way that we operate here. So, yeah, disavow and fight against Nazism here, but can we also not send fucking weapons to Nazis across the globe? Too much to ask? A little consistency would be nice, especially when it's Nazism. Okay, I'm back. So, I highly recommend you read the rest of this article. It's really, really good. It's rough times right now, guys. I'm not going to lie. It's a very, very scary time. We are seeing a resurgence of fascism, which, in America, it's rampant as well as many other countries. So, it'd be nice if we could, take a step back and fight it here. And I don't think, by the way, that the best way to necessarily defeat Nazis in this country is by just everybody that has a right-wing viewpoint punching them in the face. If they're a Nazi and you punch them in the face, it's not going to hurt my feelings, of course. It's not going to hurt me one bit. But as far as a pragmatic approach to defeating Nazism forever, the best way to fight it is actually to fight poverty. You fight poverty, you stop taking people and putting them in a position where they are more prone to turn to extreme ideology, then you will actually tear out the root of fascism and Nazism. You want to fight white supremacy? Yeah, you can punch somebody in the KKK if you want to, but a lot of times what that does is embolden the racists and embolden the impoverished people who necessarily get pulled into these extremist groups because of their poverty. If you fight poverty, you create a society where it's less likely that young people are put in a situation where they are prone to these groups being able to recruit them. So if you want to tear out the heart of fascism, you have to view it through like a Marxist lens, and you have to fight poverty, fight exploitation. If you give everybody economic rights and treat everybody economically the same, you really hamper these all extreme ideologies' ability to recruit people who are disenfranchised, because you don't have as many disenfranchised groups in your country. The individual people are less likely to feel super marginalized and super disenfranchised, and therefore are not as prone to being picked up by groups like this. So you want my idea on how to, quote-unquote, fight Nazis? You fight Nazis by giving everybody equal economic rights and don't put an entire population in a fragile position where the youth can be equally radicalized right or left. You want people to really not feel like they have to join a group simply because it's offering them brotherhood and some stability. You stabilize people's lives. Youngsters don't turn to these extremist groups. It's another good way to fight, gang violence and crime, obviously. You fight crime not by beefing up the police force, which Joe Biden's doing that shit right now too. And this shooting is only going to make it easier for him to do that. No, you don't fight crime by bolstering the police force. You fight crime by fighting poverty and economic injustice. So that's my 2 cents. Sorry for the rambling there. It's been a very long week. I've worked like 90 hours over the last 2 weeks, and maybe a lot more than that. So anyway, keep fighting that good fight out there. I love you guys. Read this whole article for yourselves. Talk to you later.